Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I want to go ahead and actually get to a little bit of college football. Now, it's a little bit of a slower time in college football. We are through the coaching carousel. We are mostly through the portal, although obviously with the coaching changes, in theory at Boston College and at Michigan and at UCLA and now at Georgia State, in theory, basically guys can still be entering the portal. But for the most part, it's a quiet time. Spring practice is going to start here in a few weeks, but it is essentially talking season before talking season, right? There's not much to really discuss. There's not really much going on in the news. Talking season is really May, June, July in the lead up to media days, but it doesn't mean that other people aren't talking about the sport, speculating on the sport, etc. Well, I bring it up because I saw some very interesting comments about a guy that I think has become the single biggest and the singular talking point of the college football offseason. That is Alabama head coach Kalen Deboer. So Kalen Deboer takes over. We all know, replacing Nick Saban, the legend. I think for the most part, he's actually done a very good job, retained most of the roster, brought a couple key pieces from Washington. The staff has finally come together. We talked about Ryan Grubb last weekend. So listen, nothing was going to be perfect. There was going to be no perfect transition at Alabama or anywhere. Remember, Michigan just won a national championship. Their head coach leaves for the NFL. There's all sorts of staff turnover there. So I could go on and on. But I bring it up because for the most part, I thought this offseason went pretty well for Kalen Deboer, but apparently there are others who feel a different way. And I saw these quotes. I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it was at least worth discussing for 2 or 3 minutes because, listen, everybody in the media has different opinions and a different perspective, but I saw somebody that just completely disagrees with me and basically said that this offseason has been a disaster for Kalen Deboer since he has taken over at Alabama. The person who said this, it is Mike Griffith from Dog Nation Daily. Dog Nation Daily, of course, is a Georgia outlet. They listen, it's going to sound like I'm being critical, but they do a very good job covering the Georgia Bulldogs. And listen, I have nothing but respect for basically anybody who, grinds in this business. With that said, Mike Griffith was on the 3-man front on Jocks in Birmingham, Alabama, was asked about really what his perspective is as a Georgia beat writer on Alabama, and he did not hold back on what he had to say about Kalen Deboer. I saw this clip floating around on social media. Here is what Mike Griffith had to say about Alabama's offseason so far. He said, "The early evidence is that things have not gone ideally. If we're being honest about it, they haven't gone ideally. The staff is in question. It's not what you thought it would be. The player retention, there have been questions about the players who left. The ability to add players has been, you've heard all sorts of talk about tampering. I don't know what's instilled much confidence in the hire at this point, except that the guy coached well with Michael Penix as his quarterback for 2 years. And who knows? Maybe he'll come out and be the coach of the year this year, and the Tide will go undefeated and win a national championship, and all of this will be idle speculation. So far, I'll be honest, I'm not impressed, and I don't know how many Alabama fans could be impressed either." Woo, buddy. Okay, Mike Griffith from Dog Nation Daily coming in hot. A lot of stuff was said there. I want to break it all down, and before we get into it, let me say a couple quick things. 2 things. One, I understand that this is a Georgia media member, okay? And by the way, I respect the Bulldogs, picked them to win the national championship 2 years ago, all that. They're incredible. The team is incredible. The program is incredible. And I understand that somebody from the outside looking at Alabama may have this opinion. And I understand it's a rivalry, right? You're kind of jabbing. Alabama has been a thorn in Georgia's side, vice versa. They've been 1-1A in the SEC for about 4 years now. Alabama currently has the crown of the SEC champion, but Georgia's coming for it. Alabama's a little bit weakened without Nick Saban, so let's take a little poke at the bear there. What I would also say, I generally, as a rule, and I think anybody who's listened to this show knows, I don't generally go after or criticize other media members. Now, I don't know if I'm going, quote unquote, after this guy, Mike Griffith. I don't know him. I'm sure he's working hard doing his job. But my general rule is I give out opinions. If other people have a differing opinion, I'm not going to attack. I don't know that I'm attacking here, but one time that I will kind of step up and say something is if I believe you're just spreading misinformation. If I believe you're just, I don't want to say making stuff up, but if you're just saying stuff without context, without facts, trying to get clicks, trying to get excitement, whatever, then I got to call you out and I got to be honest. I think just about, I'm going to say this. I think just about every single quote in this statement was completely wrong from Mike Griffith on Jocks Radio, the three-man front, okay? So let's just break it down. Let's talk about it, okay? First of all, he starts by saying the early evidence of things have not gone ideally. I don't know that I feel that way at all, but let's get into some of the individual stuff. First, he says, the staff is in question. It's not what you thought it would be. Huh? Really? Are we sure about that? The staff is not what we thought it would be. Well, is the staff not what we thought it would be? Or do they just not have the offensive coordinator that we thought they would have, which is obviously Ryan Grubb, who was at Washington, now with the Seattle Seahawks? Because when I look at this staff, I actually think this might be, I don't want to say it's better than the Nick Saban staffs of years past, but all things considered, I think this staff is pretty freaking good. You bring in Kane Womack, a sitting head coach from South Alabama, as your defensive coordinator. You bring in Maurice Linguist, the sitting head coach of the Buffalo Bulls, to be your defensive backs coach. You, by the way, retain two very important pieces off of Nick Saban's staff, which was obviously announced on Thursday. The fact that Freddie Roach will be back as the defensive line coach, and also he has taken on the title of associate head coach as well, and that you retain Robert Gillespie, a guy that the coaching staff really respects there off of Nick Saban's staff. So the idea that it's some poverty staff is ridiculous. A couple guys that were good enough for Nick Saban, two sitting head coaches is one thing. And if your argument is, well, they don't have Ryan Grubb, let's just go over this for one more time, and hopefully we can put it to bed. Listen, I'm sure Ryan Grubb's a great guy. I'm sure Ryan Grubb is really smart, and he's going to do really well in the NFL. But let's do some myth-busting Alabama football style, because this is not Ryan Grubb's offense. This is Kalen Deboer's offense, and it is totally worth noting. Why are people so freaked out about Ryan Grubb being gone? Who was Ryan Grubb before Kalen Deboer? Remember, this is Kalen Deboer's offense. Remember, the single season that has led to where we are now, with Kalen Deboer being the head coach, you know what it was? It wasn't winning all those natties at Sioux Falls at the NAIA level. It wasn't whatever. It was at Indiana as the offensive coordinator in 2019. That is what has led to this moment. It was the moment where Kalen Deboer completely elevated Indiana. They were terrible before he got there. They win 8 games. They're terrible after he leaves. And he ends up from there getting the Fresno State head coaching job, which then leads to the Washington head coaching job, which of course leads to the Bama head coaching job. Okay. Well, what is significant about that season at Indiana? It is the one year that Kalen Deboer did not have Ryan Grubb by his side. And it is the one year that set up this entire run of success for Kalen Deboer. I'm not here to say that Ryan Grubb played no part, but I think at this point, we're treating Ryan Grubb like the Pied Piper, greatest thing that ever happened. Like he is, I'm trying to think. I can't even think of an applicable, like this team fell apart when this coach left. Like, I can't even think of anything. Like maybe, I don't know, like when Charlie Strong was Florida's defensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, and then he left and the program fell apart. You found out Charlie Strong played a bigger role in kind of keeping the ecosystem of that program together. But like we're treating Ryan Grubb like he's freaking, I don't even know. But beyond that, and this is the important part, you know what great coaches do, guys and girls? What great coaches do? They have systems in place to elevate people in place. And so, yes, Ryan Grubb is gone. But Nick Sheridan worked under Ryan Grubb. And you know why Nick Sheridan worked under Ryan Grubb last year and previous years? It was so one day Ryan Grubb was going to leave, whether it was for the Washington head coaching job, whether it was for the Alabama offensive coordinator job a year ago, whether it was for the NFL. He was going to leave at some point. And this is why you have Nick Sheridan work under him. This is why you have Jamarcus Shepard work under him. This is why you have other guys work under him, learn from him, learn the system, learn the calls, learn the scheme, learn whatever. And then you put him in place when Ryan Grubb leaves. Listen, in a perfect world, you would love to have Ryan Grubb. I'm not saying that. But at some point, he was going to leave. So at some point, you had to have the next guy ready. Nick Sheridan is that guy. Now, yes, you could have gone out and signed or hired a bigger name. Bigger name does not produce bigger results. Look at all of the big coaching hires that we've seen through the years that look like they can't miss, and then they miss. And then you hire the no-name guy, and he has success. Go on and on down the list. Dan Lanning was hired the same year as Lincoln Riley. Everybody knew who Lincoln Riley was. Goes to USC. Nobody knew who Dan Lanning was except for college football diehards. Who has had more success? Dan Lanning. I'm getting off subject here. The point I'm trying to make. You could have gone outside of the family and gotten a guy. But Kalen Deboer, the goal is not to just hire the biggest name. It's to hire the best person for the job. Nick Sheridan is it. Let's keep this thing going, by the way. Let's keep it going because this was the other part that cracked me up of this statement about Kalen Deboer. 2, he said, the player retention. There have been questions about the players who left. The ability to add players has been, you've heard of talk of tampering. He says, the player retention, there have been questions about the players who left. What questions? What questions did I miss? I cover this stuff every single day. I read every interview, every article, every this. I do radio in the South every single week. What questions? I would argue, and I've argued on this YouTube channel for weeks now, Alabama lost one player that they really wanted to keep that they did not expect to lose. That's Caleb Downs. Now, he's great. He's an All-American. By the way, it's ironic a Georgia beat writer's talking about him, considering, everybody said he was going to Georgia, that he does go to Georgia, okay? But beyond that, this is the important part. Outside of Caleb Downs, most of those guys were leaving one way or the other, or they were simply recruited over. We've talked about this. Again, I'm not saying you want to lose Caleb Downs, but of everybody else, here's the truth. Isaiah Bond was clearly leaving. I don't know what Texas offered. It's not my place. It's the NIL world. I'm not going to criticize. But this guy entered the portal essentially before Kalen Deboer was even hired, and he committed to Texas basically the day after. Nick Saban retired on a Wednesday. He was committed to Texas by Sunday, not visiting. They're not the lead. He committed within 5 days. That was done before Nick Saban even retired. Caden Proctor, all the reports are that he was leaving after the season regardless. Wish him well. He's from Iowa, committed to Iowa. He was clearly some degree of homesick, and he's going back where he feels comfortable. We can argue, debate, is it the best thing for his career? It's his life. It's his prerogative. But he wasn't staying whether Nick Saban was the head coach or not. And by the way, Julian Sayin, 5-star quarterback, now that might be a loss. But remember, he didn't enter the portal until Washington brought Austin Mack, the quarterback that they had with them, to Alabama from Washington. He was the guy redshirting last year that was expected to replace Michael Penix. And so the only point I'm trying to make is of all the players that left, you had one that you wanted to keep that was realistic to keep. It was probably never realistic to keep Isaiah Bond. It was probably never realistic to keep Caden Proctor. And with Julian saying, once you take Austin Mack, it's probably ball game. That's the reality. Finally, and this is the one that it did kind of get under my skin, I'm not gonna lie. The argument, I don't know this guy's instilled much confidence at this point, except that he's the guy who coached Michael Penix, who coached well with Michael Penix as his quarterback for 2 years. To which I say, again, I don't want to be anti anybody. I just said, I'm not saying I'm anti Ryan Grubb, and I'll say it again. Michael Penix is a star. But let's be honest. Who was Michael Penix before Kalen Deboer got his hands on him? Like the idea that, Michael Penix carried him? What are we even talking about? Michael Penix, listen, I love the kid, but he was an oft-injured guy at Indiana who lost the starting quarterback job his final year at Indiana because he got beat up. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story. I remember when he entered the portal and Washington took him. And I remember thinking, that's career suicide for Kalen Deboer. I know they have a relationship, but if he gets hurt and you don't have a backup, you're screwed. Now, thankfully, it didn't happen. But like Michael Penix, all he's ever done is win with Michael Penix. The only time Michael Penix has ever won is when Kalen Deboer was with him. Here is his career. Freshman in Indiana, 68% completion percentage. Then Kalen Deboer leaves. That was when, by the way, Kalen Deboer was his offensive coordinator. 2020, 56% completion percentage at Indiana. 2021, 53% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Those are real stats, people. That's not made up. You can Google it. Use the internet. The year before Michael Penix got to Washington at Indiana, 53.7% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And he carried Kalen Deboer. I can't even, guys. I can't even. I don't know what else there is to say. Listen, as I will say, I will give this journalist credit for this. He wrapped by saying, who knows, maybe he'll come out and be coach of the year and the Tide will go undefeated and win a national championship. I don't know if that's going to happen. It probably won't. I don't think anybody's going undefeated in college football next year in the Big Ten or the SEC. But like, again, I try not to criticize other people in the media unless their takes are just factually wrong. And this is just really, really, really bad. We'll see what Kalen Deboer does. But the idea that the staff has fallen apart, that the retention has fallen apart, that Michael Penix carried him, absolutely ridiculous. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Prove all the doubters wrong. You want to show those beat writers how wrong they are? Subscribe to this channel. We got to prove them all wrong. Be back talking to Deboer, Bama, college football next week. Have a good weekend, everybody.